Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are joining from today. My name is Greg Mannix. I'm VP of International Business Development and General Manager for Europe. I'm based in Valencia, Spain, and it's early evening here. I'm joined today by my colleague, Karen Dio. Would you like to introduce yourself, Karen?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Dio. I am a Director of Investor Research, Israel Business Development, and Strategic Projects. I'm joining today in Boston, so it is exactly noon here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope that this bootcamp proves very useful for you.
If anyone has any questions or comments during the webinar, please feel free to write them in the Q&A section, and we will try to address them probably towards the end. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so just a brief introduction to Life Science Nation. Life Science Nation was formed about 10 years ago, and initially the reason for creating Life Science Nation was this investor database that's tracking about 10,000 early stage life science investors, several thousand firms around the world. And the idea was that we wanted to make it easy for early stage companies to identify investors who were a fit for them and have the means to reach out. And that's been under development all of these years, and it's being curated by a team of investor analysts like my colleague Karen, who update that information and make it quite unique. And we'll take a look at that later. We also have a business development database tracking 60,000 life science companies around the world. We do some programs for education and preparation for fundraising. The focus on Cures Accelerator includes branding and messaging work. We do fundraising workshops like today's and some other things. And in September, we have a new program coming up called the Global Roadshow Prep Course. This is a one-day intensive course. We're doing it on September 3rd. And another one on September 10th, just before our next Resi conference. And the Global Roadshow is a one-day course that will help you get ready for fundraising, help you get some aspects of your marketing collateral fine-tuned for that fundraising campaign. And we do this together with the Resi conference as a package. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to any of us at Life Science Nation. The easiest way is to reach out at resi@lifesciencenation.com, and we'll get back to you. So I spoke about Resi, redefining early stage investments. Resi's been going on for 8 years now. It started back in 2013, and it kind of was a development that came out of the investor database and the relationships that we had begun with the investment community from all over North America, Asia, and Europe mainly. And now the Resi conference has evolved into probably the premier early stage partnering conference in the world, where many early stage investors attend. Usually around 400 or more investors tend to participate at our conference. And as an early stage company, you have a chance to meet with them and request meetings. And then there's a lot of other content. And now we've developed 2 specialty conferences that take place alongside Resi. One is Resi AI, and the other is Resi Longevity. So they have a more defined focus in AI-enabled technologies and in diseases associated with longevity that make these more focused conferences quite interesting if you're working in either of those spaces. And that's what we call Resi Partnering Week, which includes all 3 conferences. And the next one is coming up in September. And just to give you an idea of the types of early stage investors who attend our conferences, this is a partial list here, and you'll see some investors you probably never heard of, and you'll also see some big firms, big pharma, big med tech, also some of the larger investment firms that participate at our conference. What they all have in common is that they all are active in the early stage space. And that is really the unique selling point for our Resi conference. Okay, so we will talk about fundraising today. That's the focus of this bootcamp. And you have to ask yourself, are you actively raising capital? If you are, do you know how long it takes? And do you know how much it costs? So we're going to address all of these things today, but typically you'll have to budget some money to raise money. There are a lot of expenses associated with getting ready for a fundraising campaign to do it right. And it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $90,000 US to do a full year fundraising campaign. Of course, this is taking into account travel expenses to conferences, and that's something that hasn't been going on for the last 18 months. But when we do get back to normal times, and let's all hope that that's sometime soon, right? You will have to budget for your fundraising. Karen, would you like to discuss some of the myths around fundraising?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there are a lot of very common myths that still persist about fundraising. These are some of the common misconceptions that we see that a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, or not even necessarily only first-time entrepreneurs, may still have about the fundraising campaign. Some information that we've picked up from seeing all of the fundraisers over the years, the successful ones, the not so successful ones, and really what investors are looking for, and just kind of showing that there are different things to think about. So the first one really that we've seen is that companies may think that they're limited to certain types of funds at different times in their company development, where you have to look for the SBIR grants, friends and family early on, along with angels, and then going to VCs and strategics later on. Now, that's not strictly true. So angels may invest later than you think. Venture capital may invest earlier than you think. Pharmas are partnering earlier. There's also corporate venture capital funds out there. There are some foundations that do venture investing. There are family offices and a lot of other different types of investors. So you really need to keep your mind open and really explore the early stage space. And really look for different types of investors, and really, keep an open mind. So pharmas are partnering earlier, and they may have different partnerships in terms of the types of partnerships they will have. Maybe it's a co-development earlier on, followed by an acquisition or something like that. So, really, really open your mind and make sure to read up on these investors, because what you can find out based on when they partner and when they'll invest will give you a lot of information on whether or not they're relevant to you. Next slide. So following that, one common myth is that it's not necessary to understand the differences between investors. You should just go after them all. but you do also want to think about your long-term strategy when you're looking to partner with these investors and know what the differences are. So getting an investment from a family office is different from getting an investment from a VC, because family offices maybe don't have as strict rules about when they want to see an exit, whereas VCs a lot of times are more limited based on their fund structure, and so they will want to see an exit within a certain period of time. Or for example, a corporate venture capital. If you get an investment from a corporate venture capital, what does that mean in terms of your partnership with a parent company? That can vary from fund to fund. Not all of them are the same. So these are all things that you want to keep in mind when you're looking at these investors. So know the differences between them, know the nuances, and be cognizant of them when you're starting to reach out to them. This is a very big one, and one that we see frequently as an issue. It's you must limit yourself to regional players. Regional funding is very, very good up to a certain point, and it's fabulous for the earliest stages, but there is generally not enough regional funding to go around for all of the startups to get them to success. So it is very crucial to start looking global as early as you can, because there are a lot of investors out there. A lot of them will invest in a larger area than you may think, and partnering globally will get you looking globally will get you in front of a lot of really, really good investors who might actually benefit you a lot more than you think. If you partner with them early. So make sure to look globally, because limiting yourself to regional players will not get you very far. And there are very few companies that can actually make it all the way through by just looking at regional funds. So commonly people also think that the average fundraising process will take them 6 to 9 months. Now, it's possible, but highly unlikely. In reality, to go through the beginning with the introductions, the meetings, the due diligence, all the way to term sheets and all of that, it will likely take you close, like more between 9 to 18 months to raise money. Because also consider, a lot of you also have other jobs in the company, and fundraising is an important part of what you're doing, but it's not all of what you're doing. So you have to balance the fundraise with all of your other responsibilities. So there may be times where you won't be able to dedicate all of your attention to the fundraising campaign, and things may get pushed off a little bit. So when you're planning your fundraise, you really want to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time and enough runway to make it through the entire fundraising campaign. You don't want to get to the point where you're like, oh no, I haven't started my fundraise and I only have 6 months of runway left. That's not a very good place to be, and that can be very dangerous in terms of making it so you may run out of runway before you actually manage to raise the funds. Now, an additional myth is that it's easier to raise a smaller round, and maybe you should just raise a smaller round and then go back and raise a larger round. In reality, it's pretty much just as much effort to raise a larger round. And what we recommend is that when you're setting out to fundraise, budget for what you need for the next 2 to 3 years. So that way, once you're done with your fundraise, you've got 2 to 3 years of runway, and then you don't have to literally go from one fundraise right into the next, because that's also not a good use of your time. There's a lot that you can do to move your company forward if you're not constantly fundraising. And in reality, most fundraises, they're going to be tranched to milestones anyway. So it's not like you're getting a huge chunk of change right at the beginning. You will be getting that money incrementally. So you might as well budget for a larger round right off the beginning. But, clearly also you don't want to fundraise too large a round for more than 2 to 3 years, because then you can run into difficulties with valuation and the like. But 2 to 3 years seems to be the good balance in terms of a large enough round so that you don't have to worry too much about fundraising immediately after, but not so large that that investors aren't willing to fork over that much money for what you currently have. Another common myth is that it's always good to have many technologies and indications at once. So a lot of investors do love platform technologies, but from what we've seen, investors like to see a lead indication and having companies focus on that. And you can let them know what your plan is for future indications. And, you may have started some preliminary work on them, but really focusing on one lead indication, taking that as far as you can, getting as much proof of concept will ultimately make it easier for you to go forward with the next indications once you're ready for them. Because the farther you go with your lead indication, the more it's de-risked for investors, and the more they're going to be willing to invest in future indications. So you also don't want to be juggling too many balls and have your attention divided too much. So by focusing on that one lead indication, investors get a good picture of your technology and how it works, and then they'll be interested in seeing what your future indications will be. Another very common myth is that you need to be referred to an investor in order to get a meeting. Now, we're not denying that warm referrals are fantastic and you should take advantage of them if you can get them, but they are definitely not the only way to get the investor's attention. Investors want to invest in the best possible companies, regardless of how they come in front of them. And there are very few investor groups that will only invest in people to whom they are referred. There are a few, but mostly just the biggest of the VC funds that are, only invest that essentially are pretty much only investing in unicorns. They're not the vast majority of funds. The most of them, you can just reach out. I mean, if you make your message compelling and relevant, and you make sure to follow up and all of that, you will probably get their attention. So don't hesitate to reach out to an investor if you don't know them. Even sending a cold email can get you in front of them. That being said, you need to make sure that you've done your research and that you're writing a good message, because that's the best way to get their attention. So another common error that a lot of companies make is that they send investors as much information as they have, and they overload them in the initial message. You want to be very consistent, concise, and make sure that you have a powerful intro message that is short and sweet. Investors get so much communication. I've heard investors likening it to drinking out of a fire hose. They get hundreds of emails in any given week, and they have a lot to go through. One investor in one of our Resi panels said that your intro deck should be like a movie trailer. You want just enough information in there to hook their interest and get them interested for the next meeting. That's your entire goal with your intro message and your intro materials. You don't want to overload them. We recommend, your executive summary and a pitch deck, because some people prefer one or the other, and then a concise message that is 1 to 2 paragraphs. Very succinct, giving them the information they need. And if they want more, they will reach out. You don't need to overload them right off the bat, because they probably won't look at everything. So also another very common myth: science is the hard part and the only thing that matters to investors, and it's easy to learn the business side. And you don't need to have a business or finance executives on the team. Investors are looking for more than just the science. And Granted, the science is extremely important, and if the science doesn't work, there is no company. But there is more to launching a successful startup than just the science. You need to know your market. You need to have a good go-to-market strategy or a sound exit strategy if you're going to do so before going to market. You need to know your competitive landscape. You need to have a good, if relevant, you need to have a good regulatory strategy. There are a lot of other components outside just the science that can make or break a company. So knowing everything, and even knowing what you don't know and what information that you need or what experts you need to bring in, having that awareness can go a long way to convincing an investor that you're a worthwhile investment. So you don't have to have all the answers, but you need to know what questions to ask and what information the investor will want you to be aware of, even if you don't have all the answers right now.
And I would just add there, Karen, and this connects back to the previous slide about sending too much information. We've seen many times that teams that have a very strong science background will send a deck with 30 slides of extremely technical information about their technology and not have nearly enough information about other things that investors are very interested to hear about, like especially who's on the team, what's the IP situation, what's the competitive landscape. So it's not just about the science, is it?
No, it is definitely not just about science. And, it's also about, being realistic, and it's great to be enthusiastic about your company, but you also want to be grounded, because you can't say, oh, this company is going to cure everything, because investors know that's not realistic. You also can't say we have no competitors, because also not realistic. And that is a huge red flag for investors. So you need to be very cognizant of everything that's going on, that an investor needs to know about what can make your company successful or make it fail. And just be aware. And last but not least, you only need to reach out to investors once, and you don't need to follow up. This is where a lot of companies may fall off, because it's not, they'll be like, oh, I have this list of investors, I'm just going to send them all an email and see what happens. And then they don't hear back, and they're like, well, what good was that list of investors? You need to be able to send out more. You have to send out more than one message. And follow-up is key. You don't know if maybe the investor's in the middle of a deal just then, or maybe they were super busy that week and it got buried in their inbox and they just didn't see it, or maybe, something they wanted to answer and something came up and they forgot. So you definitely need to have some sort of follow-up strategy, and a good way to keep track of your outreach in order to really help with a successful campaign. We recommend using a CRM, because then you can track all of the messages you've sent, if you've gotten any responses, what follow-up you need. And we also recommend, having a set series of follow-up messages. And we'll talk more about that later when we talk about partnering and investor outreach. But, one really important thing about looking at the investor messages is, knowing that a no isn't always a no for always. Sometimes it's just a no for right now. Maybe that you're too early for them, or maybe, if you pivot in a different direction, or something like that, they may end up becoming relevant. So keeping track of all of these messages and what comments the investors have given you is also important, because you can sometimes use that to reach out to them in the future should they become relevant. And, you know, also make sure to really look at the constructive criticism you get, because you can update your message based on the feedback that you're getting from investors, and then maybe get better traction in the future. And not only that, you know, it's always important to follow up with investors and make a good impression on them, because you never know, maybe what ends up happening is they're saying, oh, well, you know, you're a great company, you're not a fit for me, but I know someone who would be helpful for you. So, you know, just really make sure that you're really following up and going through and taking all of this into account, because you never know when this might be relevant, and you never know when you might hear back. And a lot of this information is available in the book that the CEO of Life Science Nation, Dennis Ford, wrote in the Life Science Nation Executives Fundraising Manifesto. So if you want, we can send you a PDF copy of this book. If you just reach out to resi@lifesciencenation.com, we'd be happy to send you a copy.
Yeah, and we will also be happy to send you a copy of these slides together with the book. So just let us know if you're interested, and we're happy to send that along. Okay, thanks, Karen.
Absolutely.
That being said, we are going to have a quick look at a database of investors, because we talked about how important it was to identify investors who are a fit for your company. And that means you want to be able to identify investors who are looking for your type of technology, perhaps for a particular indication, and the stage of development that you're in. And as Karen mentioned, you know, you don't want to look only to regional investors. You also want to look to global investors who are a fit for you. So how do you determine what investors are a fit for your company? Well, one way is to use a database like I mentioned earlier, the one that Life Science Nation has been developing over the past 10 years. And what's important is to be able to search globally. And you can see here that the Life Science Nation database is global in reach. So, you know, large number of investors from the United States, not surprisingly, but also pretty much from all over Asia and Europe, where the most of the investors are found. And Karen also mentioned that you're not limited to angel groups and VCs for your fundraise. And it's important to look into other types of investors, like corporate VCs, like foundations, like family offices, and also the strategic partners like big pharma, big medtech. These entities are getting involved earlier and earlier with life science companies in different ways. So you definitely want to have them on your radar. Okay, so in terms of fit, you know, how do you determine which investors are a fit? So you can define what sector your technology is in. Let's say, for example, a medical device that is an implantable device for any given indication, let's say musculoskeletal. And you can define what stage of development you're in. So say you're in development and just starting, going into clinical phase for your med device. And then you can also define where you're located. So let's say, just for today's sake, that you're located in the US, and we run a search. And the database comes up with 649 potential investment firms from all over the world who would invest in a company with those criteria. So you can see there's a VC from Silicon Valley, another VC from China, there's a corporate VC from Germany, there's a VC from Germany as well, another VC from China. So really all over the place. And then you get big pharma like Abbott and some foundations and some private equity firms. So the kind of information that we track to help you identify and really understand what each investor is about and whether they're a fit for you. We start with some kind of general information. So this is a corporate VC, of course, 3M Ventures. And what's unique about our database, and you'll see it here in this mandate section, what you'll see here is that this information is taken in a personal interview, and it's quite detailed in terms of forward-looking information. What is this investor looking to invest in the future, moving forward? And the way we get this information is in an interview, as I mentioned, and you can see up here at the top which of our colleagues, in this case is my colleague Claire, who spoke to this investor, and she takes information like, what stage of development do they invest in? So the firm prefers to invest in Series B, but they're also open to seed to Series A. Okay, so quite broad, and you get an idea of how much they tend to invest, typically between 2 and 5 million for early stage companies, and you get also some kind of more detailed information about the types of technologies they're looking for. So in medical devices, they're particularly interested in class 2 devices with 510(k) regulatory pathways. And you get, kind of some information on the different types of technologies they're looking for. And then, what's really important is not only identifying what investors are the right ones to reach out to, but to know who to reach out to and what to send. And that's something that we work with a lot of companies at Life Science Nation to help them prepare for their investor outreach campaign. In terms of how to message and what information to send. But the actual database gives you this message from the investor, which is the investor telling you how they want to be contacted. So in this case at 3M, there are 2 people that are the contact people who you should reach out to. And it's told, it's clearly stated here, their email, and what you want to send them. So in this case, it's an executive summary and a presentation or a pitch deck. And these are the people that you'll reach out to. And then finally, there's contact information for other people at this particular investment firm. So, this a database like this will just save you a lot of time. Of course, it's not the only way to identify investors who are fit for you. There are other ways you can do Google searches. You can read the industry literature online and find out who's investing in what companies. But having a database like this is just a really efficient tool to identify many investors and have the information you need to reach out to them. So that is, let's get back to the presentation now. Okay. Okay, so we had a look at the database of investors, but another really important part of your fundraising journey will have to do with conferences, attending conferences where you'll have a chance to meet with potential partners, including investors, the strategic partners, et cetera. And we're just going to talk about some of the keys to being successful at a partnering conference, like our Resi conference. And I think just going very and I'll show you in just a minute what it looks like. But on our partnering platform, where you will be looking to identify the right people to reach out to and hopefully book meetings with as many people as possible during the conference. The first thing you can do is to create a profile for yourself and for your company that the investors you want to meet with will be able to refer to and understand more about what you're doing. So super important to create a profile. And then you want to reach out to those investors that you want to meet with. And one of the most common errors that we see is companies who send a really poor message to the investors and really give a bad impression or just an insufficient impression on the investors about what the company does and why they might want to meet with you. So we think it's important to include all of these key elements in your message without making it too long, because if it's too long, no one will read the full message. But if you can get in a really complete introduction of yourself and the company in your message, the key value proposition, why is your technology different, better, faster, cheaper, whatever, what stage of fundraising are you in? So I think it's perfectly acceptable and really desirable to put in your message how much money you've raised so far and from who, and how much money you're raising now, because I think that's really key information for investors. They want to understand that, and I think it's good to put that in your message. So, and then if you can customize your message and make it specific to a particular investor, for the ones that are your top targets, I would really recommend doing that if you do a little bit of research on them. So here's an example of a meeting request message. And as I said, we'll send you these slides if you're interested, and it'll just give you an idea of the kind of information and kind of the length of a meeting request message that we know has been effective, because this company has been successful using their message, using this message to get meetings with investors. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that at a conference like the Resi conference, I mentioned that we usually have about 400 investors, 300 to 400 investors attending. If you limit your outreach to the investors who are a fit for you, you still will have upwards of 100 potential investors to reach out to, typically. And you really have to put in the effort to send an outreach message to as many investors as you think might be a fit for your company. And it can be, you can see here that many companies during the digital Resi era, starting in March of 2020, and that we've been in for the last 18 months, many companies are getting more than 20 meetings with investors over the 3 days of the conference. So if you think about it, that's a huge opportunity. But to get 20 meetings, you'll see 20 or more meetings, they reached out to 100 investors on average to get those 20 meetings. So it's really important to reach out to a lot of investors. And then, as Karen mentioned earlier, follow-up is so important, not just when you're reaching out to investors by email, but also when you're reaching out to investors to get a meeting at a conference. So, send your initial meeting request that's really well thought out and compelling. And then after, a few days, if you haven't heard back, send a follow-up message and focus on different topics that hopefully will be of interest to the investors in your different follow-up messages. So for example, you can focus on your technology in your first message. You can focus on the market and the unmet medical need that your product is addressing in the second follow-up. You can focus on the management team. And then you can also send a document in your message, you can create a link and send that in your message and say, hey, please take a look at my executive summary, or my what we call a tear sheet. A tear sheet is like a one-page data sheet about your company. And that's really useful to give an overview of your company. And if the investor can just click on that link and take a look at what you're doing, sometimes that will put them over the edge so that they'll take a meeting with you. So follow-up is super important. I recommend, and this is what I've seen from companies that have been attending Resi, the ones who are really successful, they follow up multiple times leading up to the conference. The partnering platform was open for a total of 3 weeks leading up to the conference. So you have plenty of time to send follow-up messages over those 3 weeks leading up to the conference. And then at the Resi conference, we have a competition called the Innovators Pitch Challenge, which is a super opportunity to get additional visibility. So you can see here that the companies that participate in the Pitch Challenge are featured on what we call the live agenda, and their logos will link to a dedicated landing page. And on this dedicated landing page, you can upload really any information that you'd like, but you will definitely upload a 4-minute pitch video, and then you can upload an executive summary, a slide deck. If you have other information, you can also upload that. And then during the Resi conference, there are several live sessions going on that are focused on a specific area. So you can see the one here, it says session 1, digital health. So here we have typically 5 digital health companies that are pitching to 5 investors who are interested in digital health. And there's a live interaction. It's live streamed, and there will be Q&A for about 7 or 8 minutes for each company. And it's just a great opportunity to get additional visibility. You're able to follow up with those 5 investors after the conference is over. And it just, it's an all around, it's really a fun experience and productive. So something to think about. So the takeaway about partnering is your success depends on how much effort you put into it. And if you put the effort in, you can really have a great conference and meet with a lot of people. It could be the Resi conference, it could be any other conference that you attend, bio or whatever. But when you are attending a partnering conference, your goal is to get as many meetings as possible. And it really, I think it's really sad when I see a company miss out on this opportunity and register for a conference and then not request very many meetings or any meetings at all. It's a missed opportunity, because if you can get 10 or 15 meetings, which is very common, and if you're really good, upwards of 20 meetings over 3 days, if you think about it, how difficult would it be to get 20 investor meetings outside of a conference? How long would that take you? And here you have a chance to do it in 3 days if you really put the effort in. It's a huge opportunity. So something to think about. Okay, before we go on to preparing the investor meeting, which Karen is going to present, I wanted to quickly show you the partnering platform for the Resi conference. So you can see kind of what I was talking about creating a profile for your company and searching for investors who are a fit for you. So hang on just a second. So this is what the partnering platform looks like for digital Resi. It actually looks the same for in-person Resi, but right now we're still in the digital era. We are just, a lot of people ask when we're planning on having an in-person conference again. Right now we're planning for January 2022, during the JP Morgan week in San Francisco. And that's the plan as of right now. It probably will be a hybrid conference, but at any rate, the partnering platform looks like this, and it is a tremendous tool to identify investors and to get visibility for yourself. So, as I mentioned, the first thing you'll do is you will create a profile for your company. And I recommend that you also put in a bio about yourself and a headshot, so that I think it just makes things more personal. And if you go to the search section, this is where you can search for 537 different firms that were attending the conference. And you can find investors and companies here. So just to give you an idea of what a company profile looks like, here's a company called A3 Health. And I think they did quite a good job with their profile. They put up their logo, a description, brief description of the company. They uploaded a couple of documents. So they have a pitch deck and an executive summary that if an investor is interested, they can take a look. And then they created these different sections with information, technology overview, supporting metrics, alliances, current financing needs, etc. So all of this information is available to investors to look at, to decide if they want to take a meeting or not. And then this company's CEO put up a short bio and headshots of the two people attending from the company. So I think that's a really good profile for this company. And it's something that every company attending Resi should do, because it improves your chances of getting more meetings. And it all comes back to the effort that you put in to the conference that will help you find success. So if we go back to the search section, here we'll use a very similar methodology as we did with the investor database that we saw earlier. So basically you'll say, I'm looking for investors who will invest. You can pick investor type if you want to see just one type of investor, or you can leave that blank. And you can say, I'm looking for investors who are investing in medical technology, if we use the same example as before, for musculoskeletal disorders. And my medtech phase of development is, I'm in clinical stage. So I see here that there are 149 potential investors to meet with. And as I read through these, I will see that some of these investors may not be a good fit for me. So, but there will definitely be more than 100 potential investors to reach out to. And if I really want to get the most out of the conference, I will reach out to all of the investors who are a fit for me. And what you'll see is there will be, oh, look, there's 3 investors that we saw earlier. So, you go through these investors, you read a bit about what they're looking for. If you think it's a fit, there's a button here. It's not here now because this conference has already ended, but it'll say book a meeting. And that's where you'll put in your outbound meeting request. Okay, I am going to go back to the presentation, and Karen will be presenting, how do you prepare your investor meeting?
Thank you, Greg. And I'll try to really go through this so that we do have some time to answer questions. But essentially, and this is important, whether you're reaching out to an investor, you're planning your meeting, even before you're sending your message, you really want to know the investors. So you really want to do your research, start with the firm's website, read about their mission, look at the portfolio companies that they've invested in. Some investors will actually have that available on their website. If not, a lot of times there are a lot of resources online. Websites like Crunchbase can be a great place to also look and see what portfolio companies these investors have. Just knowing what they're looking for can make a big difference. You also want to read about the team and especially the person with whom you are meeting. So you look at the firm website. A lot of times they'll have bios for the team on the website. Look them up on LinkedIn as well. A great place to find out more about their background. Really, we cannot stress this enough about how you need to know your audience. And think about that. So, for example, if you're scheduling a meeting with a VC versus a pharma, you're probably going to tailor your message a little bit differently, because a VC is going to be looking to make a different type of investment than a pharma partnership. So you may want to tailor your message a little bit differently, and that's where knowing your audience can really be key. Next slide. So for the meeting itself, there are some strategies that you can employ that can not only make the meeting itself more successful, but also increase your likelihood of getting a follow-up meeting. So first of all, if possible, try to have 2 people attend the meeting so that one person can be taking notes. And this is especially important for a partnering conference. If you have meetings that are back to back, you're going to need notes to prepare for the meeting so that you remember who you're meeting with. And in addition to that, you're going to want to take notes during the meeting so that you remember if they ask for anything specific in a follow-up, because you don't want to really miss that opportunity of the investor asked for a specific piece of information and you don't want to forget to share it when you follow up with them after the meeting. So you really want to make sure to have that information. And if you have a lot of back-to-back meetings, this is especially important because they're going to start blurring together. If you're in too many meetings back to back, you're not going to be able to remember the details. And you don't want to really be taking notes yourself if you can avoid it, because you want to make sure that you're fully engaged and interacting with the investor. Now, you should have some sort of pitch deck for you that will take around 15 minutes if you have to run through it, but we recommend that you initiate your meeting as a conversation, as opposed to just immediately going into your pitch deck and running through your pitch. We've just found that companies that employ that strategy of a face-to-face conversation with full interaction end up having better investor engagement in the meetings and a better follow-up response afterwards. It's definitely important to have the slides on hand so that if you need to refer to a specific piece of data, or if you want to show them a specific image of your product or anything like that, that you have it on hand. But we really recommend you do this as a conversation. And you also want to make sure to ask the investor questions as well. So on the next slide, in terms of the types of questions you want to ask. So you want to remember that if you're getting an investment, that's more like a long-term relationship with the investor, and it can be extremely damaging to a company if there is a lot of friction between the investors and the management team. So you really want to know who you're getting into bed with. So make sure to ask these questions ahead of time. And the types of questions that you want to ask are, how involved is the investor after investing? Is it purely financial? Are they going to, be on the board? Are they going to be involved in anything else? What are you getting out of the investment other than just money? Are they going to connect your network? Do they have any other strategic help that they can give you, whether they're manufacturing or any sort of connection like that. Now, also, how will the investor type affect the investment? Because that's also something that, I discussed previously, but for example, with the corporate venture capital, like how connected are they to the parent company? Will an investment from the corporate venture capital mean that there's some sort of strategic long-term with the parent company or not at all? Something rights of first refusal or things like that. You need to know ahead of time what terms there are to better plan for your future, because you may need to raise more funds in a next round, and you want to make sure that the investor that you're connecting with is not going to make it more difficult for you to raise future rounds as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Karen. And this last slide is about a program offered by the NIH for phase 1 and phase 2 grant recipients on the SBIR program. And there is a program called Tava, Technical and Business Assistance, where you can apply for this additional grant money of $5,000 for phase 1 awardees and up to $15,000 for phase 2 awardees. And with that program, we can offer you several solutions, including our database and some of our fundraising preparation programs to really help you get ready for your outreach and hopefully increase your chances of success. That's our goal. We want to see you be successful. So one of the questions in the Q&A was about whether this was included in their NIH sponsorship. So there are some companies that are sponsored to attend Resi by the NIH coming up in September. And what those companies get, they will be participating at Resi, so they'll be able to partner with investors, and they'll also be participating in the Innovators Pitch Challenge. So the LSN investor database is not included, but the participation at Resi and the Innovators Pitch Challenge are included. Karen, the other question was in the chat was about CRM programs. Do you want to talk about what we're familiar with?
Absolutely. So we use Salesforce, and you can get a license like for the basic package. It's not that expensive. I think it's on the order of what, $25 a month, Greg, right?
Yeah, the simple license is $25 a month per user.
Yeah. So Salesforce is great, and the basic package would definitely be sufficient for managing a fundraising campaign. There are some free CRMs out there. HubSpot is one of them, and that can definitely work because of the we've heard that it's that it's sufficient for managing a fundraising campaign. So there are free options out there if you can't afford a Salesforce license as well. There's another question out here about are all investors accredited investors because of the 506B rule when we upload the decks? First of all, we do vet the investors who attend our conferences to make sure that they are direct investors. There are service providers that attend, but they are labeled as service providers. But one thing that we do definitely suggest is that any deck that you upload is non-confidential regardless. But you don't have to, make sure that there's, a warning about investing or anything like that. The investors are all aware, so you don't need to include that disclaimer in your pitch decks.
That's right. And I think we're out of time, Karen. It's just the top of the hour.
Oh, okay. So the question is, you would not put the valuation in the raise amount. You don't I don't think you need to discuss the valuation right off the bat, especially because from our experience, that can be a little bit fluid for a pre-revenue company, but we definitely do recommend including the raise amount. We generally suggest including in your message, we are raising so many funds, like so much money to achieve the following milestones. So that is definitely something that we would recommend including not only in your pitch deck, but also in your intro message.
Yep, I agree. I think valuation is a discussion for a little bit later in the relationship with the investor. I don't think you need to put it initially in your non-confidential deck.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So you have our email here. You can reach out to us at resi@lifesciencenation.com. And with any other questions you have, and as I said earlier, we're happy to send you a PDF of the book and the slides from today. So thank you all very much for joining, and we hope to see you soon at Resi or somewhere else, hopefully in person soon.
Thank you, everyone.